You know that feeling when you walk away from a conversation and your chest is tight, your mind is racing, and you keep replaying everything you said, wondering if you made it worse? Maybe it was with your partner. Maybe it was your boss. Maybe it was someone you love deeply, and no matter how hard you tried to explain yourself, they just didn't hear you, and they didn't feel heard either. That feeling, that quiet devastation of being completely misunderstood by someone who matters to you, is one of the most painful experiences a human being can have. And most people have it multiple times a week. Here is what nobody tells you. The problem is almost never what you said. The problem is what happened before you said anything at all. There is a single listening technique that researchers studying human connection have identified as the most powerful communication tool ever documented. Therapists use it. Negotiators use it. The most effective leaders in the world have quietly built entire careers on it. And once you understand it, you will never have a difficult conversation the same way again. I want to give you a real piece of that today, because what you are about to learn in the next few minutes has already helped people completely transform the most broken relationships in their lives, resolve conflicts that had been festering for years, and feel genuinely close to people they had almost given up on. And if this resonates with you, if you find yourself thinking, I need to go deeper on this, I need tools, I need practice, I need something that actually holds me accountable to changing this, there is a program linked in the description below. I am not going to pitch it hard right now. Honestly, if you are someone who thinks they already communicate well enough, this probably is not for you. But if some part of you suspects that the way you listen might be costing you something important, keep watching. So let me tell you about a moment that changed everything for someone I know. She was in the kitchen. Her partner walked in after a long day and said, I just feel like nothing I do matters around here. And she was exhausted too. She had been managing everything, the schedules, the bills, the invisible labor that never gets acknowledged. So she did what any reasonable person would do. She defended herself, she listed everything she had done, she explained, she justified, and within 4 minutes, they were in the worst fight they had had in months. He slept on the couch, she cried alone. And neither of them could even explain what the fight was actually about. Sound familiar? Here is what was actually happening. When he said nothing I do matters, he was not making a logical statement. He was not presenting evidence for debate. He was bleeding emotionally. He needed one thing. He needed to feel felt, not fixed, not corrected. Felt. And this is where almost every human being makes the same catastrophic mistake in difficult conversations. We respond to the words, we do not respond to the person beneath the words. The technique is called reflective empathy, and it is deceptively simple. So simple that when people first hear it, they think, that cannot possibly be enough. But it is not just enough, it is everything. Here is how it works. When someone says something that triggers you, something that feels like an accusation, a complaint, a criticism, before you respond to the content of what they said, you reflect back the emotion underneath it. Not the words, the feeling. So when he said nothing I do matters, instead of defending or explaining, she could have said this. You sound really exhausted and unappreciated right now. That is it. 7 words. And do you know what would have happened? He would have stopped. His nervous system would have downshifted. Because being truly heard does something neurologically measurable to the human brain. It reduces cortisol, it lowers the defensive wall, it signals safety. And here is the counterintuitive part. When people feel heard, they become dramatically more open to hearing you. Let me give you the science behind this for just a moment because it matters. When we feel misunderstood or attacked, the amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for threat detection, takes over. You are no longer having a rational conversation. You are in survival mode, both of you. And no amount of logic, no amount of valid points, no amount of being right will penetrate that state. You cannot reason with someone whose brain is in fight or flight, but the moment someone feels genuinely seen, truly reflected back to themselves without judgment, the prefrontal cortex re-engages. The thinking brain comes back online, and now real communication is actually possible. This is not a soft skill, this is neuroscience. And the people who understand this, the ones who have actually practiced it and built it into how they move through their relationships, they live in a completely different world. Their difficult conversations end differently. Their relationships have a different texture. There is less walking on eggshells, less lying awake at night, less of that exhausting cycle of conflict and distance and reconnection and conflict again. But here is where most people get stuck. And I want to be completely honest with you about this because it is important. Reading about reflective empathy is easy. Understanding it conceptually takes about 30 seconds. Actually doing it in the moment when your heart is pounding and you feel attacked and every instinct you have is screaming to defend yourself, that is a completely different thing. That gap between knowing and doing is where most people live forever. They know what they should do, they just cannot do it when it counts. The cost of staying in that gap is enormous. Think about how many hours you have spent in painful conversations that went nowhere. Think about the relationships that have slowly eroded because the same arguments kept repeating. Think about the loneliness of feeling like you cannot really connect with the people closest to you, even when you love them deeply. That is not a small cost. That is your life. That is years. Now let me show you what reflective empathy actually looks like step by step, because I want you to be able to use this today. Step 1. Listen for the emotion, not the argument. When someone is speaking to you in a difficult moment, train your attention on what they must be feeling in order to say what they are saying. What is the emotional experience underneath those words? Step 2. Name it back to them. Use phrases like, "It sounds like you are feeling," or "I hear that you are really frustrated," or "That sounds incredibly overwhelming." You are not agreeing with their version of events. You are not conceding anything. You are simply acknowledging that their emotional experience is real. Step 3. Wait. This is the hardest part. After you reflect, you stop talking. You let it land. You resist the urge to immediately follow it with a but or a however or your own point. The pause is not weakness. The pause is the technique working. Step 4. Watch what happens. Almost always, the other person will either soften and say, "Yes, exactly, that is exactly how I feel," or they will correct you. They will say, "No, it is not frustration, it is more like disappointment." And that correction is not a failure. That is an invitation. Because now they are helping you understand them more precisely. They are opening a door. I have seen this work in conversations between people who had not spoken in 2 years. I have seen it work in corporate boardrooms where negotiations had completely stalled. I have seen it work between parents and teenagers who were speaking completely different emotional languages. The context changes. The technique does not fail. But let me address the thing I know some of you are thinking right now. You are thinking, "This sounds manipulative. Like I am just saying things to get what I want." And I want to sit with that for a second because it is a fair instinct. Here is the difference. Reflective empathy is not a manipulation tactic when it comes from a genuine desire to understand. It only feels hollow if you are doing it as a performance. The people who use it most powerfully are the ones who have actually done the inner work of becoming genuinely curious about other people's emotional experiences. They are not just saying the words, they have rewired how they listen. And that rewiring, that deep shift in how you show up for people, that is not something you do overnight, and it is not something you can fully manufacture from a single video, which is exactly why some of you are going to want to go further. Now let me tell you what happens on the other side of this. When you actually embody this skill, not just understand it but live it, your relationships change at a fundamental level. People feel safe around you in a way they cannot quite articulate. They trust you faster. They open up to you more honestly. Conflicts that used to leave you both depleted start resolving in minutes instead of days. Your partner stops being someone you feel like you are always fighting against and starts feeling like someone on your team again. Your professional relationships develop a depth that creates real loyalty. And perhaps most importantly, you stop carrying that low-grade anxiety that comes from knowing the next hard conversation is always around the corner. People who master this describe a feeling like a weight being lifted. Like they had been white-knuckling every important relationship in their life, and suddenly they have real tools, real capacity, real confidence in the moments that matter most. That is not an exaggeration. That is what shifts when the gap between knowing and doing finally closes. The truth is, most people will watch this video and feel that familiar spark of recognition. They will think, "Yes, this is exactly what I need to work on." And then life will move on and nothing will change because insight alone has never transformed a behavior that is deeply habituated. The ones who actually change are the ones who decide that this time is different, that the cost of staying the same is too high. If that is you, if you are done having the same painful conversations and walking away feeling more disconnected than before, the program in the description below exists for exactly that reason. Not everyone is ready for it. But if you have watched this far, you already know something about yourself. You are someone who takes this seriously. Do not let that impulse fade. Scroll down right now before this tab closes and before something else pulls your attention away. What you do in the next 60 seconds will tell you everything you need to know about whether you are actually ready to change.